Hey, you want to play a board game?
Sure, why not? Oh, no. No, no.
Welcome, thrill seekers, to a topic that has been causing chills and thrills for generations. The Ouija board. Is it a window to the spirit world? Which is a simple board game. This enigmatic tool has intrigued and terrified people for over a century, and its mystique only grows with each passing year. Some swear that they have communicated with the dead using this board, while others believe it is just a harmless toy marketed to the gullible public. Igor, cue the intro. So I know you've heard about the Ouija board. Perhaps you've played one before, perhaps you heard stories about it, or like me, simply heard, I don't even want to talk about my experience, which I got from more than a few people, including my sister, who is a big part of why I'm fascinated with the Ouija board. But we'll talk more about that later in the video. At its most simplest, the Ouija board is simply a flat board marked with letters, numbers, and other symbols. Players place their fingers on a small heart-shaped doohickey called a planchette, which moves around the board to spell out words and phrases in a process called automatic writing. And that is where it separates the non-believers and the people who are scared to death of this. Like most things in the past, the exact origins of the Ouija board are shrouded in mystery and marketing lies. But it's generally believed to have evolved from the spiritualism that was popular in the mid-19th century of people trying to reach out to the massive amounts of people killed in the US Civil War. They'd sit around tables and seances and ask spirits to either knock on or just move the table. They could have just played Monopoly with them. Seriously though, not that any of this stuff can be proven, but here's what I found out. References to talking boards have been found in Chinese Song Dynasty documents going back to 550 BC. But of course, there's doubt that actually happened. More recently, talking boards prior to the official Ouija board were common in the United States in the 1800s, but none of those were marketed as a board game. So, at the Boardgame Sherpa, we're skipping over those. There's actually a Museum of Talking Boards website, so go check them out if you want more info. The first modern Ouija board was marketed in the United States in 1890 by a man named E.C. Reich, a coffin maker in Maryland with a strong interest in spiritualism. Charles Kennard and Elijah Bond found out about this and started the Kennard Novelty Company to exclusively make and market these new talking boards. None of those guys were spiritualists, but they were smart businessmen who saw the board's marketability. There are many different versions of how it's got its name, a combination of the French oui and the German ja. Asking the board to pick its own name, mispronunciation of a popular women's rights activist by the fake medium they were working with, and quite a few others. They eventually settled on Ouija. There was a report that the administrator of the US Patent Office would only allow them to get that patent if the device spelled out his name correctly. And while I seriously doubt everything about this story, supposedly the Ouija board came through, and on February 10th, 1891, the patent for the first Ouija board was given. It quickly became a popular parlor game and was soon being sold throughout the United States and other countries. Eventually, the Kennard Novelty Company sold the rights to the game to a man named William Fuld, who marketed it as a tool for spiritual communication. Fuld was a master showman and used dramatic advertising to create a sense of mystery and intrigue around the board. During the early 1900s, the Ouija board was a popular tool for young people to use during courtship. Couples used the board to ask questions about their future together. The board was seen as a way to test the strength of the relationship and to gain insight into what the other person was thinking. It was even featured on a Saturday Evening Post cover. Over the years, the rights to the Ouija board changed hands several times, eventually coming under the ownership of Parker Brothers and later Hasbro, making it an official board game. Side note, according to a 1986 interview with then-President Robert B.M. Barton, Parker Brothers paid a staggering $975,000, equal to $8.9 million today, for the Ouija board rights. It was the most expensive acquisition the company had ever made. They only paid $500 for a Monopoly in 1935, but it paid off. They made their money back in 2 years. So, how does it work? Personally, I'm betting on the scientific explanation for how it works. The planchette moves because of a phenomenon called the odometer effect, where unconscious movements of the fingers are translated to movement of the planchette. Users of the board are pretty much moving the planchettes themselves, not any spirits or external forces. Sometimes innocently, other times not so much. When I was a kid, my older sister Teresa had a Parker Brothers Ouija board and brought it out to play with a 9 to 10-year-old me who was very gullible. And at the time, the thing actually moved on its own. I was sold hook, line, and sinker. And then the planchette started insulting me. and thus began my lifelong distrust of anything spirit world related. The funny thing is, when I asked my sister how she felt about the Ouija boards for this video, she was terrified of them and couldn't even bring herself to talk about them. But she was also terrified by the movie The Exorcist when it came out. In doing research about the game, I found out that she isn't the only one. In that movie, which many people consider a documentary, the possessing demon was summoned into existence by the solo use of the Ouija board. It got so popular that the Ouija board's reputation changed to being a summoner of demons. It even affected the sales of the Ouija board due to the Exorcist effect. They are still being sold. I just bought this one a few weeks ago, but nowhere near the levels that they were. Oddly enough, the sales shot up again in 2014 after the horror movie Ouija came out. The inspiration for this video was a post I saw on social media about a huge Ouija board that someone built up and set up in, of course, Salem, Massachusetts, lovingly named OuijaZilla. The popularity of the Ouija board has risen and fell many times over the last century, but it's still talked about and it's still big business, so it's doing something right. So, is it a board game or a portal to the spirit world? As you saw in the opening of this video, my wife has absolutely no interest in this game. Yes, the scene was over dramatized for effect, but she honestly doesn't want this game in the house. Once this video is uploaded, I'll probably donate this to someone else. Side note, if you watched my last video where I interviewed Jack Birkenstock of the Bodana Group in York, Pennsylvania, I found out that they accept board game donations. So if you don't know what to do with those old board games that you don't want, check out thebodanagroup.org. They do some wonderful work with board games and therapy for people with autism or social anxiety. Other rational friends who aren't usually superstitious have offered to play the Ouija board with me, but not in their house. They don't think it is a portal to evil, but they do believe it's a portal to the spirit world, and you can choose what type of spirits you'll bring into your house. Just like in the living world, there's a bunch of jerks in the spirit world, and you don't get to choose who's around at the time of your session. So, where do I fall with the Ouija board, really? I believe the planchette really does move by the subconscious of people touching it, or at its worst, older sisters torturing your younger, more impressionable brothers, Teresa. But I'm still not going to play this by myself. I've got enough to worry about without bringing a random needy spirit into my life. So, how do you feel about the Ouija board? Tell me your experiences in the comments below. And while you're at it, subscribe and give a big thumbs up to the channel. Normally, the Boardgame Sherpa channel has the goal of taking the fear out of learning new board games. And this episode is no different. But you just might want to skip this game if you really don't want any otherworldly fear or stress. Now, if the spirits were cool and you could play board games with them, I might have a different opinion. See you next episode.